Rafe set the cat down and turned his attention back toward Lily, who was gazing through her telescope and taking notes. She lived for the stars as much as he lived for the sea, and he couldn't look away as the fireflies darted in the long grass. The sweet fragrance of moonflowers by the door flooded his senses, and he longed for a good cigar. He longed to touch her more, and to kiss her. That's all he could think of when they were sailing earlier. The wind had tossed her hair about, and that beautiful full smile of hers was nearly as bright as the late June sun. She hadn't sat by either, but asked for him to teach her to sail, so he had. They had spent hours out on the ocean together before the sun dropped heavy and orange in the sky, and it was time to return for dinner, and he still wished to kiss her. Are you ever going to come outside? She called to him at last, or do you plan only on keeping watch? He laughed in spite of himself. He would miss her when he left, and he had to leave. But until then, they could share what little they could, right? Was it wrong to kiss? Was it only going to be one? But what happens when one kiss is not enough? That way led to trouble, but he gathered he had heaped it upon himself the moment he had read her letter. She needed a husband, but he could never be that for her, especially when Henry didn't have a wife. Rafe would only disappoint Lily. She needed a stable, honest husband. He knew he should have said goodnight and left, knew as he stepped out of the cottage and walked toward her, knew it as he approached, and she looked up from the telescope and flashed a smile in his direction that made him forget his name. Trouble. Are you looking for something? He asked, stopping short of touching her. Aren't we all? I suppose, I mean, in that, and he pointed toward the telescope. Oh, yes, I'm looking for. Oh, wait, do you truly wish to know? I don't want to bore you. You never bore me, Lily. You say that now, but given enough time. And he sighed, then chuckled. What are you studying up in the sky this evening? Well, it was documented in England's star catalogue that several stars were part of a constellation, but they were marked incorrectly, and I'm sure of it. I've been charting them over the past several months to cross reference them before I write a letter to the Royal Society. Can I see? Of course. She steps aside, waving her arm for him to move forward. She was gorgeous and perfect and utterly brilliant. Whether she believed him or not, he could listen to her talk about the stars forever. And he gazed into the telescope, scanning the night sky. It was remarkable. He navigated ships by these same stars for years, but he never knew they would lead him to Lily. If you look to the right, Lily said, her voice a warm whisper by his ear, that's the cluster of stars. A few were never documented, and others charted incorrectly. Rafe turned his head to meet her brown eyes gazing at him in anticipation. You love the stars, Lily. I love that about you. Even in the pale light of the full moon, he saw the flush gather on her cheeks. People fall in love with the stars, but they're foolish to do so. It's thought they're dead, you see. Astronomers have noticed stars are fickle. Some fade and others suddenly shine bright. That's because they think we see from Earth as a memory of light. We fall in love with that, with a memory, as if our hearts need the extra burden of being tricked by the heavens as well as in love. He stood back and studied her for a moment, twiddling a blade of grass between his thumb and forefinger. I think you're wrong. I assure you I'm not. What we see, if it is true, and those celestial bodies do die, they still guide us home. They are beacons, and memories, whether good or bad, can do the same. Like how you returned home, good or bad, Lily, I am here to. Fetch your grandmother's ring, yes, so I've heard. And again he chuckled. It's not as if I can forget. You continue to remind me. Better to be off and on your way. And he stepped closer, dropping his head down so she could hear, and only she could hear what he was about to say. I am reminding myself because when I am with you, I feel as if I will forget why we are on this journey. That I don't wish to bring you to my brother's estate any longer. I wish for you to be mine and mine only. And yet you only say so. And he didn't miss the tremble in her voice. What do you want, Lily? She pushed him aside, or so he thought, but her hand remained on his chest, and her fingers curled into his shirt, keeping him close. I wish to be wanted. Truly, I wish to be loved for me as I am. I wish to be allowed to live my life without being used for another's gain. But I do want you. Only until we reach the island, right? Lily? And she refused to look up at him. Let's take a walk on the beach. Lily pulled away. But I'm looking at the stars, and he shook his head and backed away toward the path down the cliffside. He wasn't about to kiss her for his family to see, but he wished to kiss her thoroughly and well. He was finished acting the gentleman. He was never good at that role anyhow. She would hate him soon enough if he confessed the truth. Rafe waited for her at the bottom of the steps. He kicked off his boots and rolled up the cuffs of his trousers. It was glorious to have his feet in the sand once more. Lily slowly descended the steps, her gaze fixed firmly on her feet. She had let her hair down, and in the moonlight it had made him nearly feral. She might as well have been made of the heavens, for she looked just as lovely and just as out of reach. He grabbed her hand and pressed a courtly kiss on the top, just a soft press of his lips against her soft skin, but it made his chest ache all the same. Really, Rafe, what are we doing? He had no earthly idea, to be honest. That was the very devil of it. Something within him could no longer untangle himself from her. Maybe it was the full moon. Maybe he didn't wish to say goodnight to her just yet. Maybe it was simply that he wished to hear his very favorite sound in the world, her laugh. Sit down, please. Lily narrowed her eyes and lifted her nose playfully before sitting down on the bottom step. Tall grass waved back and forth as a soft breeze swept over the beach. Lily reached out and ran her fingers over the dancing blaze, mesmerized. He loved the way she moved through each day full of wonder, how she never stopped asking questions. He sank to his knees and reached for her feet. She made a soft noise in the back of her throat as he lifted the hem of her dress and reached for her right slipper. His hand skirted up the back of her soft calf before he removed her slipper, then slowly the next. What he would do if he could lay her back here by the dunes, pushing up her skirts and taste her. Rafe, she whispered. He stood, holding out his hand for hers once again, and pulled her to stand. Are you going to talk? She asked, backing away from him. Or do you plan on being broody and mysterious for the rest of the evening? I have important business to see to. She spun and dashed around him. He sprinted after her, and the two chased each other into the surf. She reached down and splashed him. He did the same until their clothes were damp and the air in his lungs burned, and he only wanted her, here on this beach, dancing under the stars. I'm quite excellent at broody, he mumbled as soon as they stopped to catch their breath. No, no, you're not, she laughed again. And he couldn't stop himself as he laughed as well. He didn't recognize the big booming sound reverberating through his chest, shaking him awake. This is what it felt like to be alive, and he hadn't realized until now how numb he had been to it all. Come here and kiss me, love, he said, his voice a low rumble. Kiss you? Lily pursed her lips and looked upward. But I might miss a comment. Make a wish first, then. I wouldn't know where to start. Then start with me. And she sighed, throwing her hands down to her sides. You make it so difficult, Rafe. Do you know that? Hmm? I wish I could hate you. I wish I couldn't stand the sight of you, but I can't help but. He licked his lips, waiting. I think that is. I have never experienced this before. There is this feeling within me, like this warm buzzing, and it consumes me whenever you are around or when I think of you. Do you think of me often? And she reached for his half untied cravat and pulled him close. Only every other minute. It's quite unfortunate. Sounds terrible. Oh, it's horrible. I'm sure that I'm losing my mind. But it's such a lovely mind, it would be a grave loss to science. Lily laughed and blinked hard, puzzling over what he had just said. I don't believe anyone has ever said something like that to me before. You keep doing that, keep surprising me. You're not what I planned on. When he had started this whole scheme, he only thought to aggravate Henry, to push and prod until his brother finally snapped and told him to leave. But his brother hadn't, and instead, Rafe had done the right thing and wrote back to each letter apologizing, all except for Lily's. He couldn't turn her away. Her letter had been special. Rafe knew Lily was what Henry needed in life. Someone who could bring in the sunshine, someone who could stand by him and do what was expected. But that's where the plan went wrong, because Lily needed to do anything other than what was expected. She had spent far too much of time doing that already, and he couldn't stand to see her dreams crushed, or thinking too much. She pushed up onto her feet and kissed him until, for a moment, everything made sense. They made sense, and that voice in the back of his mind telling him to leave quieted.